G'day, greetings from Melbourne, and it's a Saturday morning about 7 a.m. Look, I've just been here for 2 days delivering some male suicide prevention training. What I wanted to do in this short talk was explore some of the political factors that shape men's health and well-being, with a particular focus on how we approach male suicide in Australia, but in a way that's relevant to all men's issues and relevant to the UK as well. So I'm going to tell you about a couple of things that happened here, but first some context. So in the last year, I've been mostly focused on exploring the social factors that shape men and boys' health, and there's basically three layers that we can look at. First, there's the individual factors like exercise and weight and smoking and help seeking and self-care and all that kind of stuff. The things that an individual man can do to keep himself well. But underneath that, then there's the social factors like say boys' education, our experiences of boyhood and fatherhood, our working lives, our relationships and social connections, and our access to male-friendly services. And then those social factors themselves are shaped by a whole load of systemic factors like government policy and the funding that's available and the way that institutions operate, like charities and public sector, and our cultural attitudes, so like the cultural stereotype that men don't need help. We often focus on how that shows up at an individual level. Stupid men, they think they don't need help and then they kill themselves. What I'm interested in is how the belief that men don't need help shows up at a collective level and results in us not giving funding for or putting policies in place or putting services in place for men. Because if we're no good at giving help to men, then is it any wonder that men aren't as good at getting help as they could be? So three things then that have happened in the last year, which I want to highlight. Firstly, last week, we got the announcement from the national government that the male health policy, which was written in 2010 and hasn't really been active, is going to be revived and rewritten, and there'll be a new male health policy from 2020 to 2030. So that's great news, because we're one of the few countries in the world to have that national policy which can highlight issues like male suicide and direct the way that services may be delivered down at a state and local level. But then there's what's happening right now, because a couple of months ago, same government announced tens of millions of dollars of new funding for suicide prevention. Sounds great, and it's good stuff that they're going to be doing, but it wasn't focused on male suicide. It's presented as gender neutral, but actually, when you look at where it's going, it's mostly going to help women. So one of the chunks of funding is to help people who've previously attempted suicide. We know they're a high-risk group. We know that intervention can make a difference, but the majority of those people aren't men, they're women. 70% of people who use those services are women. And that's because not because men don't access them. It's because the majority of people who show up at emergency departments having had an overdose, for example, are women, and that's where they get referred from. So it's never going to change. That service is always going to help more women than it helps men. So that's a really powerful example of how, at a systemic level, what we do in terms of government, in terms of funding, in terms of the funding that charities will ask for and accept, and in terms of the funding and the ideas that the public will accept. That's a really powerful example of how, at the systemic level, our political approach to gender issues and social issues actually has an impact on how many people suicide and how much access to help different groups have got. And then another example, let me stick with that for a minute. So how do we change that, right? So because no politician has lost votes by saying I'm going to do more for women, and no politician that I know of has won votes by saying I'm going to do more for men. The charities know that funding just comes into gender neutral approaches to mental health and suicide prevention, so they don't ask for funding to do stuff to help men because there's no money in it, either from the public or from funding bodies or from the government. Funders, for whatever reason, don't give money, probably a similar set of reasons, and the public believes that men don't need help. So why would the public argue and campaign for more funding to go towards male suicide? So this is like this complex web which has all these different actors and players maintain the status quo and feeds into the stereotype that men don't need help. And then a final piece is there's some really good work going on at a local level. There's a pilot study going on with the primary health networks. There's about 30 of those in Australia. They deliver health services at a more localised level. 12 of them have been chosen to deliver a suicide prevention pilot. One of the criteria is that they identify 3 target communities in their area, and men, or a particular group of men like young men, older men, working age men, are getting chosen as one of those 3 groups in many of the areas. And it's one reason why I was brought to Melbourne to deliver male suicide prevention training. But I was talking to some of the guys up in Brisbane who were doing this. They selected LGBTI community, the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander community, and men of working age. And their approach was not to deliver service at those groups, but to work in partnership with those communities and co-create new approaches and provide some funding for those communities to do that. And what they found was that when they reached out to the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander community, there was already existing networks of organisations and individuals already working with those communities who they could then work together with. Same with the LGBTI community. And then they took the same approach with men and went, right, let's just get all the organisations and the individuals in our area who are working to help men and boys, and they're the experts at doing that. We'll talk to them. There weren't any. That's how the patriarchy works. Apparently the patriarchy is set up to favour men. Well, when you look at grassroots level, all the different services that are set up to support specific communities, there aren't services there for men and boys, because, hey, guess what? Men don't need help. So we need to make radical shifts, both at a kind of top-down level. We need national policies actually targeting men's issues and things like male suicide. But we also need a bottom-up approach. We need to build the men and boys sector from the grassroots up and have individual people and organisations in local areas advocating for and delivering services for men and boys, so we can get this 2-pronged approach, top down, bottom up. But we need to change the political landscape to do that. We need to make it okay to say that men need help, not to tell men that they need to change and think it's okay to get help, but to tell communities, to tell all of us that it's okay to give men help. It's okay to fund men's projects. It's okay to have national strategies that focus on men and boys, and it's okay to have a male section of the British Psychological Society. We need all these kind of structures in place if we're going to address issues like male suicide, men's mental health issues, men's physical health issues, and the broader social issues that men and boys face. That's my piece. Good day to you all. Have a lovely time in London. I wish I could be there. Hope I can be there next year.